The sky over Wyoming territory burned the color of blood. Smoke rolled off the hills in thick ribbons, coating the distant ridgelines like morning veils. A dry wind swept through the abandoned town of Elkhorn Ridge, rattling warped shutters and kicking dust into the teeth of a man who hadn't spoken in 2 days. He adjusted his hat, squinting through the haze, and moved forward, bootstep silent on ash. A rifle hung from his back. His name was Elijah Cade, though he hadn't said it aloud in years. Folks who remembered called him the ghost of Greystone Pass. A bounty hunter once, then worse. Now, just a man trying to outrun the echoes of every wrong thing he'd done. He stepped past a collapsed wagon, the wood still warm beneath his palm. Burned less than 12 hours ago. No bodies, no livestock, just ruin. The air stank of scorched beans, horse sweat, and kerosene. Someone had made sure nothing survived, nothing but the whimper. It came again, soft, like a bird trapped under floorboards. Elijah froze, listened, turned his head toward the charred remnants of the mercantile. His hand moved to the knife at his belt as he stepped over the threshold. The building's roof was gone, rafters split and blackened, but the stone hearth still stood. And beneath the counter, tucked between 2 sacks of flour that hadn't yet caught fire, was the girl. She looked about 6, maybe 7. Soot smudged her cheeks like war paint. Her dress, what was left of it, hung in ribbons. She stared up at him with eyes too old for her face, eyes that had already seen the devil and weren't sure he'd left. He crouched. "You alone?" She didn't speak. Elijah looked over his shoulder, scanning for motion. No one. Nothing but smoke and silence. "You hurt." She flinched when he reached forward. He paused, changed tactic, pulled a canteen from his saddlebag and set it down, backing away. After a long moment, the girl crawled forward, snatched it, and drank like a dying animal. Her fingers trembled, so hard the tin clanged against her teeth. He waited. Then, without a word, he turned and walked out. She followed. It was the first choice she made. Not survival, not trust, but something deeper, an instinct old as time. She didn't know who he was, only that he hadn't left her to die. Elijah mounted his horse slowly, wincing as the leather pressed into the bruised ribs he'd earned in a bar fight 2 towns back. He looked down at her, eyebrows lifting. "Can you ride?" Still nothing. He reached down, and she let him lift her, stiff as a plank. She sat behind him, arms wrapped around his coat, like a ghost clinging to flesh. He rode south. They didn't speak for 3 hours. Not until they reached the old church on the bluff above Bitter Creek. The steeple leaned like a drunk, but it hadn't burned. The bell still hung in the tower, mute. He dismounted and helped her down. They might still be here. But the doors were open, swinging in the wind. Inside, dust coated the pews. The pulpit stood empty. Blood stained the back wall, streaked downward like someone had slid slowly, painfully to the floor. He sighed and sat in the front pew. The girl didn't move. "What's your name?" he asked. "Nothing. Mine's Elijah Cade." The wind whistled through broken panes above. "I was headed to Carson's Ford. Figured I'd trade my last cartridges for some beans and ride out through Red Valley before the snows hit." He leaned back. "Don't reckon I'll make it there now." She stepped forward, dragging her feet like she didn't know how to walk anymore. He watched her go to the altar, stop, then look down at something just behind it. Elijah stood, followed, a small pile of stones, rough, stacked in a careful pyramid. A grave, fresh. He stared. "You bury someone?" She nodded. "Just once. Elkhorn Ridge," he said softly. Were they your family?" She looked up. For the first time, her lips parted. "My mother," she whispered. "My baby brother." Her voice sounded broken, like glass crunched under boot. Elijah swallowed the burn in his throat and reached out, brushing soot from her hair. "That makes you the bravest person I know." He took a long breath, then stood. "You stay here. I'll bring food." "No," she clutched his coat. "Don't leave." Her eyes pleaded in a way that spoke beyond words. He nodded. "All right." They built a fire in the corner of the chapel, fed it with splinters from pew benches. He gave her half a biscuit and the last strip of jerky. She didn't ask for more. As night fell, Elijah leaned against the wall, rifle across his lap. He didn't sleep. Not fully. His ears twitched at every owl hoot, every whisper of wind. Near dawn, he heard it. Hooves. He slipped outside, motioned for the girl to hide behind the altar. She obeyed instantly, like someone who had practiced. Down the hill came 3 riders. Quiet, purposeful. They didn't look like ranchers. Their coats were black, faces masked with red scarves. One carried a Spencer repeater, another a whip. Elijah stepped forward. "Morning, gentlemen," he said evenly. The lead rider stopped. "Ain't your business who we are?" "Might be," Elijah replied. "I got a child up there. She's the only one who made it out of Elkhorn." A pause. Then, "We're looking for her." "That's so." "She's not yours." "She's not yours either." Silence. Then came the sound of a rifle cocking. Elijah's hand dropped to his Colt. "You want her," he said, voice hardening. "You'll have to take her over my body." That was enough. The first shot rang out. Elijah dropped to his knee, fired twice. The second rider jerked backward and fell from his saddle, blood blooming across his chest. The other 2 split, one riding hard left, the other right. Gunfire cracked like a whip across the ridge. The chapel window shattered. Elijah grabbed the girl, dragging her down behind the altar. "Stay down," he growled. The chapel door burst open. A shadow crossed the threshold, rifle raised. Elijah fired once, center mass. The man dropped. He counted heartbeats. 2, 3, nothing. Outside, the last horseman galloped away. Elijah stood. The church stank of smoke and blood. He looked down at the girl. She hadn't screamed, hadn't cried. "You all right?" he asked. She nodded. They couldn't stay. By noon, they were deep in the pines, riding narrow trails few white men knew. Elijah's shoulder burned where a bullet had grazed him. The girl pressed a cloth to it without being asked. He grunted as she tightened the strip. "You know who they were?" he asked. She hesitated. "They were looking for me." "Why?" She didn't answer for a long while. Then she said, "Because of who I am." That was all. They made camp near the edge of Black Elk Canyon. Elijah cooked beans over the fire. She sat with knees pulled to her chest, watching the flames like they held her memories. "You got a name?" he asked again. She didn't speak. He turned back to the pot. "Clara," she said quietly. He looked up. "My name's Clara." He smiled faintly. "Clara what?" She paused. Then, "Clara Running Deer." He blinked. That name meant something. He remembered a story, told in hushed voices at trading posts and border forts. A union between a Cheyenne chieftain's daughter and a fur trapper who once saved her tribe from a massacre. They had a child, a girl. She was supposed to be hidden, protected. A symbol, they said, a bloodline meant to unite what war had torn apart. It couldn't be. Could it? "Your father," he asked slowly, "was he white?" She nodded. "Your mother?" She sang to the fire, wore feathers in her braid. "Her name was Blue Elk. They killed her while she held my brother." Elijah felt the air leave his lungs. "And now," Clara said, eyes not moving from the fire, "they want me too." She looked at him. "You'll leave me soon." He stared at her. "No, I won't." "You will. Everyone does." "I ain't everyone. You don't know who I am." He leaned forward. "Maybe not, but I know what matters." She looked at him for a long time. Then her small hand reached out, barely touching his coat sleeve. He said nothing, just let her hand rest there. Later, as the fire died, Elijah took first watch. He sat with his rifle cradled across his lap, eyes scanning the trees. Wind whispered through pine needles, cold and sharp. He could have ridden away days ago, could have left her in the chapel, or with the preacher in Carson's Fork. Could have claimed he'd done enough. But he hadn't. Something about this child, about Clara Running Deer, had burned through the callus on his heart. She was more than a survivor. She was a spark. He didn't know yet who hunted her or what she was meant to become. But he knew this. He'd kill for her. He'd die for her. And maybe, just maybe, he'd live for her too. The fire cracked softly beside him. She slept in the shadow of his saddle, wrapped in his old trail blanket. He sat there till dawn, eyes open, heart awake, listening to the woods breathe. And for the first time in years, Elijah Cade wasn't running from past. He was walking toward something worth saving. The wind carried ice through the pines. Elijah Cade guided the horse through a narrow draw, trees crowding the trail like sentinels. Snow hadn't yet fallen, but the sky pressed low and gray above them, thick with promise. His breath steamed in front of him, and Clara's small arms wrapped tighter around his waist with every drop in temperature. They hadn't spoken much since Bitter Creek. He figured she was still turning things over in her mind, what she'd seen, what she'd lost, who she'd become. So was he. He'd spent the first part of his life chasing men who ran from law. Now he was running from something meaner, something that didn't carry a badge or wear a price tag. Whatever they wanted Clara, for it wasn't gold. It was blood. They'd stopped 2 nights in the forest already. Elijah rationed their food to half meals and chewed pine bark when the growling in his belly made his hands shake. Clara never complained, never asked for more than what he gave. She watched the trees like she expected them to shift in bare teeth. That night, beside a creek whose banks were slick with frost, Elijah taught her how to snare a rabbit. "Line the trail," he muttered, crouching low. "See this bend? Rabbits funnel through here. Don't ask me why. Habit maybe, like folks who always sit in the same pew at church." Clara copied him, fingers nimble despite the cold. Her hands had stopped shaking 3 days ago. "I didn't think girls knew how to trap," she said. "Girls can do anything boys can. Sometimes better." He gave her a glance. "Anyone ever teach you to shoot?" She shook her head. "Mama said the only thing sharper than a bullet is a woman's silence." He smiled faintly. "Smart woman." By dawn, they'd caught 2 rabbits. Clara cleaned them with the small knife Elijah gave her. He watched her hands, delicate but sure. Her father had to have been a frontiersman. Her mother, maybe medicine woman or tribal noble. There was purpose in her movements. Strength born of stories told by firelight, old and sacred. Later that morning, he let her ride alone for a stretch. She wobbled in the saddle but stayed upright. He walked beside the horse, glancing up every now and then. "You think they're still following us?" she asked. "Don't reckon they stopped." "Why me?" He didn't answer right away. "There's power in your blood, Clara. Some men don't like when that power belongs to a girl or to someone they can't control." Her voice turned quiet. "You're not like them." "I was." She stared down at him. "What changed?" He looked up, then forward again. "A little girl in a burning town. Who didn't run? Who trusted me?" She went silent after that. By the 3rd day, they reached the foothills near Devil's Tooth, a jagged rock formation pointing skyward like a snapped fong. Elijah knew the region well. Not far now to cross timbers, where an old Cheyenne friend once told him there'd always be shelter. The trail bent through a deep ravine, flanked by boulders and cliff walls high enough to block the sun. That's when he heard it. The cry of a hawk, but wrong. Hollow. Repeated. He turned sharply, eyes scanning the ridge. "Off the horse," he said. Clara obeyed. Gunfire cracked. The tree beside them exploded in splinters. Elijah shoved Clara behind a rock and pulled his rifle. "Ambush," he hissed. Another shot ricocheted nearby. He couldn't see them. Shadows danced along the rim above, masked shapes moving like phantoms. "Clara," he said low, "run when I say." "I'm not leaving." "Don't argue. You're the one they want." "I won't go." Another shot. Closer. He rolled left and fired. Someone grunted and disappeared from view. He turned back to Clara, just in time to see a man drop from the rocks above, landing a few paces behind her. Tall, pale eyes, coat stitched with tribal beads and scalps. He held a curved knife. Clara screamed. Elijah fired. The shot echoed like thunder. The man crumpled. Silence fell. Then a voice called out from the cliff. "Come. Cold. You're wasting strength, Cade. You can't stop what's coming." Elijah stood slowly. "Then come down and try me." "No need. You've already done it." Then silence. Nothing moved. Not the wind. Not the birds. Just breath and blood and the iron taste of fear. They waited for an hour, but no more shots came. By afternoon, they crossed a ravine and found a grove where the stream ran cold and clean. Elijah cleaned the wound on his forearm just to graze. Clara gathered moss for the bleeding. She moved with quiet assurance now, like she'd already crossed some line a child shouldn't have to. What did he mean, she asked. That you already did it? I think he meant you saw his face, Elijah said, and now he can't let you live. She watched the blood run down his arm. He won't stop. No, he said. He won't. The next day, they reached the edge of cross timbers. Old trees towered like the bones of giants, their roots split stone. A narrow trail wound through the oaks to a glen where smoke drifted from a lodge made of birch bark and pine poles. Elijah dismounted and lifted Clara down. Who lives here? She asked. Someone who owes me a favor. He approached the lodge and knocked once on the antler-strung doorframe. A voice answered, deep, measured. I see you survived the war after all, Ghost. Elijah smiled. Red Fox. The door opened, and there stood a Cheyenne man in his late 40s, broad-shouldered, eagle feathers braided into his hair. His eyes burned like embers. They embraced briefly, the way men do when death has circled them before. Red Fox looked past Elijah to Clara. His expression changed. Where did you find her? Elkhorn Ridge. The Cheyenne man frowned. We heard the stories. No survivors. She was one. Red Fox knelt, looked into Clara's eyes. She has her mother's fire, he said softly. You know her? Elijah asked. Red Fox stood. I knew her grandmother. Blue Elk's line runs deep. This girl is blood of two nations. Somebody's after her. Red Fox's expression darkened. Then the stories were true. He motioned them inside. The lodge was warm and lit by a fire that danced in the smoke hole above. Bundles of herbs hung from the beams, and painted hides lined the walls. Red Fox poured tea from a stone pot, then sat beside them. There is a man, he said, calls himself Silas Thrain, former Pinkerton, turned preacher turned mercenary. He believes prophecy is power. He believes Clara is the key to his empire. Empire? Elijah snorted. What kind of man builds a kingdom on a child? The kind who fears what she might become. Clara sat still, her tea untouched. I don't understand, she whispered. Red Fox leaned forward. Your mother's blood traces back to the 7 sisters of the moon, women with visions, protectors of the earth. Your father's line bore the mark of freedom fighters, men who resisted the railroads. Together, that blood threatens men like Thrain. They fear balance. They fear peace between nations, so they destroy it. Clara's lips trembled. They killed my brother. Red Fox's gaze softened. I know, and you carry his light now. Elijah sat, his cup down hard. So, what do we do? Red Fox stood. We get her to the crossing, past the Bitterroot Range. There's a place, sacred, hidden. She'll be safe there. She won't go without me. Red Fox nodded. Then you come too. That night, Clara slept between firs, her breathing steady. Elijah sat outside the lodge, pipe smoke curling into the sky. Red Fox joined him. She's changed, Elijah said. She's beginning to remember who she is. Elijah looked over. You think she's really the one? The last? Red Fox didn't answer for a moment. Then, I think men like Thrain don't chase shadows. And I think the land cries for healing. Elijah glanced toward the fire. I've killed men, Fox. Many. But I never protected anything worth dying for. Red Fox rested a hand on his shoulder. Now you do. Just before dawn, Elijah woke with a start. His hand went to his revolver. Clara wasn't there. He stood fast, heart pounding. Scanned the shadows. Then he saw her, out by the creek, kneeling. He moved toward her. She turned before he reached her. I saw her, she whispered. My mother. He stopped. In a dream? No. She stood in the water. She sang. Elijah stepped into the clearing. The creek gurgled quietly behind her. Mist hovered over its surface. What did she say? Clara looked up. That I must walk forward. That I carry more than my name. She took his hand. "Will you help me?" His voice broke. "To the end." She nodded. Then the woods behind them snapped, a branch breaking. Red Fox appeared, rifle in hand. "We move now," he said. "They're coming." The three of them disappeared into the pines just as the first pale light touched the treetops. And behind them, far away, a crow screamed. Snow fell like ash upon the Bitterroot Mountains, gentle at first, then heavy, cloaking the pine ridges in white silence. Elijah Cade pulled his collar tight as the wind clawed across his face, his breath curling into the early dusk like smoke from an extinguished flame. Beside him, Clara trudged with quiet determination, wrapped in a heavy elk-hide coat Red Fox had given her. Her boots sank deep with each step, but she never asked to stop. Not once. Behind them, Red Fox moved like a shadow, watchful, unflinching. They had traveled through narrow gulches and wolf-haunted valleys for 6 days, winding ever upward toward the sacred pass that led to the Shoshone lands, where Clara would finally be beyond Thrain's reach. But each night the signs returned. Carved tree bark, broken trail markers, unnatural silences in the forest. They were being tracked. Elijah knew it was only a matter of time. They camped beneath an overhang near the headwaters of the Crystal Fork. The fire was small, barely enough to warm their hands. The wood was damp, the ground colder than bone. Clara sat across from him, knees drawn up, staring into the flickering orange. She looked older now. 10, maybe, though she still hadn't seen her 8th winter. Something in her eyes had changed. They no longer waited to be rescued. Elijah tossed her a strip of smoked venison. She caught it one-handed, tore a bite off like a scout in training. He chuckled softly. "You're tougher than most grown men I've met," he said. She glanced up, chewing. "Then you've met the wrong man." Red Fox gave a dry snort of agreement. Elijah leaned back, wincing as the bruised ribs protested. "We'll make the crossing tomorrow. It's high country from here, thin air, harder climb. But once we're over, we follow the river east into the Shoshone Basin." "Will they help us?" Clara asked. "They will," Red Fox answered. "They understand what you are." She stared into the fire again. "And what is that?" The Cheyenne man leaned forward, voice low. "You are what the land remembers. You are 2 bloods born into one path. Not torn, not broken, made whole." Elijah watched her take that in. No flinching, no fear. Just the quiet understanding of a child who had been forced to grow faster than God ever intended. He took first watch, sitting near the edge of the ledge, eyes scanning the slope below. The moon hung low and full, lighting the valley like silver poured from the sky. He thought of the men still out there, riding behind trees, watching through rifle scopes. He thought of Thrain, the preacher with death in his mouth and prophecy in his heart. And he thought of Clara, curled beneath a buffalo hide, her breath slow and steady. He didn't sleep. At dawn they climbed. The pass narrowed to a spine of rock, only wide enough for one at a time. The wind howled through the chasm like a banshee mourning the living. Elijah led, Clara in the middle, Red Fox covering the rear. At one point, Clara slipped on a patch of frost, nearly falling into the ravine. Elijah's hand shot out, catching her wrist just in time. They didn't speak, just locked eyes. She nodded once. He pulled her back to her feet. By midday, they reached the top. The land beyond stretched wide and wild, forested valleys, white-capped ridges, and the glint of the river far below. Elijah sighed, letting the sight ease the ache in his chest. Clara stepped up beside him, hand slipping into his without looking. Red Fox caught up, rifle slung over one shoulder. "That's it," Elijah said. "We're through." Red Fox tilted his head. "No, not yet." Elijah turned and saw them. 5 riders, blocking the path behind them. They came slowly, methodically, no rush in their movements. All wore long coats. 3 carried rifles. One had a hat with a white feather tucked in the brim. But it was the man at the center that drew Elijah's eyes. Silas Thrain. He looked nothing like a holy man. His beard was short, neat, his eyes pale as winter sky, rimmed with the smug confidence of someone who'd never been told no. A silver cross hung from his neck, catching the sun. He stopped 10 paces away. Elijah Cade, Thrain said, his voice smooth as whiskey on a priest's tongue. Still playing shepherd, I see. Elijah stepped forward, rifle at his side. Turn around. Thrain smiled. You always did confuse redemption with suicide. Red Fox raised his weapon. You've no place here. I have every place where prophecy touches earth, Thrain said. The girl belongs to us. She belongs to no one, Elijah growled. Thrain gestured casually to the man with the white feather. He stepped down, drew a pistol. You think you can walk into legend, Cade? You think hiding her in the mountains changes what she is? She's a child. She's a symbol. Then why are you so afraid of her? Thrain's smile faltered. Clara stepped forward, past Elijah. Her voice rang clear in the frozen air. You're afraid of me because you think I'll destroy what you built. Thrain stared at her. I know you will. She lifted her chin. Then run. The sound came from behind them. Cracking branches, distant hoofbeats. Another group. More riders. They were surrounded. Red Fox cursed softly in Cheyenne. Elijah stepped in front of Clara. There was no cover. No way down. Nowhere to hide. Only fight. Thrain raised a hand. Give her to me, Cade. I'll let you die clean. Elijah's grip tightened on his rifle. No. The preacher sighed. Then so be it. The world erupted. Gunfire exploded in every direction. Red Fox fired first, dropping one of the front riders. Clara hit the ground, rolling behind a snow-dusted boulder. Elijah spun, shot left, hit someone in the thigh. Screams echoed. Horses reared. Thrain's men surged forward. Elijah took a round to the shoulder, spun from the force, blood soaking into his coat. Red Fox moved like a panther, taking 2 more down before a shot tore through his side. Elijah! Clara screamed. Elijah turned, saw Red Fox stagger. Get to the girl, the Cheyenne shouted. Go! Elijah dropped his rifle, drew his Colt, fired twice. Thrain's horse screamed as it took a bullet in the neck. The beast reared, throwing the preacher. Then Clara was there, dragging Elijah behind a fallen tree. You're hit, she said. He nodded, teeth clenched. Ain't the first time. Red Fox was still fighting, one hand on his bleeding gut, the other swinging a hatchet. Thrain stood, dazed, blood in his mouth. Clara crawled forward. Clara! Elijah shouted. She didn't stop. She stood between the broken tree and Thrain. Her face calm. You want me? She said. Then look at me. Thrain raised his pistol. Elijah raised his revolver. 2 shots rang out. One struck Elijah in the leg. The other struck Thrain in the throat. He fell to his knees, eyes wide, blood pulsing through his fingers. He looked at Clara one last time, then collapsed dead. The silence returned. Elijah lay, gasping, watching the snow settle on his jacket. Red Fox had fallen, unmoving, his hand still gripping his axe. Clara walked to Elijah. Her hands trembled as she pressed them to his wound. You're not dying, she whispered. Not now. He gritted his teeth. You did good, girl. She smiled, tears streaking her cheeks. I didn't run. No, he rasped. You didn't. It took 3 days to get down the mountain. The others fled once Thrain died. His men scattered, frightened without their prophet. Elijah rode slung over the horse's side, barely conscious. Clara led the reins, silent and strong. Red Fox they buried beneath the tallest pine at the pass. Clara sang an old song her mother once taught her, soft and mournful, in a language Elijah didn't understand but felt in his bones. They reached the Shoshone camp at the river bend on the 4th day. Clara stepped into the fire circle, unafraid. They welcomed her. Elijah was tended to, fed, healed slowly by old women with deep wisdom in their hands. He stayed long enough to see her laugh again. When he left, she gave him a gift, a carved piece of bone in the shape of a bird. I'll find you, she said. He smiled, eyes misted. I reckon you already did. Years passed. The land changed. Railroads came. Towns rose and fell. Names disappeared from maps. But in the high valleys near the Bitterroots, they still told the story of the girl who walked through blood and snow, carrying a legacy older than bullets. They said she became a bridge between nations, a healer, a chief, a voice. And they said a man once thought he was saving one child. But what he saved was a bloodline. And in saving her, he saved himself. So, what do we take from this tale? Maybe this: what we carry matters less than who we carry it for. And sometimes, all it takes is one hand held out in the fire. If this story moved you, don't just let it pass. Share it. Speak it. Because someone out there's still waiting to be saved. The storm rolled in fast, a wall of steel-gray thunderclouds smothering the late summer light. Elijah Cade rode alone now, the mountains behind him, the frontier ahead. Each hoofbeat of his horse sank into the drenched earth with a hollow sound. Rain spit sideways across the empty prairie, biting like sand. The road was little more than a wagon trail carved by boots and blood. It had been 5 years since Clara, running deer, vanished into the folds of the Shoshone Basin, hidden by a people who guarded her like flame. Elijah had left her there, just as Red Fox intended. It should have ended there, but it didn't. The name Silas Thrain had refused to stay buried. There were whispers, agents regrouping, trails of bodies from Oregon to Kansas. A burned map found in an outlaw's saddlebag. Thrain's crest carved into a church pew in St. Louis. Dead men don't rise, Elijah told himself. But evil did. It shifted, changed names, put on different coats. Now, he was riding toward the town of Dry Chapel, a place he hadn't seen in years. Not since his last bounty led him there, one of Thrain's men, a sharp-eyed tracker named Merritt Dole. The man died with a grin on his face and 2 names on his lips: Elijah Cade and the girl. Elijah hadn't touched a gun in months, hadn't spoken Clara's name aloud in longer. But when the news reached him, a settlement raised on the outskirts of Wyoming territory, survivors whispering of a girl with 2 braids and the voice of a leader, he saddled his horse and didn't look back. Thunder cracked overhead. The storm bled across the horizon in jagged veins. By nightfall, he reached Dry Chapel. The town sat on a rise above a dry gulch, its chapel long since gutted by fire, its saloon the only light flickering through the dark. A piano clinked inside, too slow for dancing, too hollow for comfort. Elijah dismounted, tied his horse, and stepped through the batwing doors. The room fell quiet. 20 eyes turned. Men froze mid-drink. A dealer at the far table palmed a card and slipped it under the table. Elijah's coat dripped water across the floor. He scanned the room with that same hard gaze, the one that once emptied barrooms on sight. A man stood from the corner. Late 30s, leather vest, fresh boots, the kind of posture that said he'd earned his confidence the cruel way. "You're Elijah Cade." It wasn't a question. Elijah nodded. "You got a message for me, or just a death wish?" The man smiled. "Neither, but the one who's looking for you might have both." He stepped forward, pulled something from his coat, and tossed it onto the table between them. A white feather. Elijah stared at it. Not a symbol. A challenge. "Where'd you get this?" "Same place your girl was seen. Settlement up near Broken Bluff. Preacher's Ridge." Elijah stepped forward. "Is she alive?" "Maybe," the man said. "Maybe not. All I know is your name was written on the door in blood, alongside hers." That night, Elijah rode out again. Every mile to Broken Bluff felt like a fist pressed against his chest. He hadn't seen Clara in 5 years, hadn't heard her voice, hadn't known if she still braided her hair or wore her father's old compass around her neck. But he remembered the way she stood on the ridge with Thrain's pistol pointed steady. He remembered the blood in her eyes and the steel in her voice. She was no child anymore. He reached Preacher's Ridge by dawn. The place had been a way station for passing miners once, but now the buildings leaned with rot. Something black curled from the chapel chimney. A single figure stood beside the graveyard, cloak whipping in the wind. Elijah dismounted, hand on his holster. The figure turned. Clara, older now, taller, her eyes just as fierce. "Been a long road," Elijah said. She nodded. "Too long." He walked to her, slowly searching her face. "You all right?" "I will be," she answered, After tonight. He frowned. Who's here? Clara looked toward the ridge. He calls himself the Risen One now. Says he's a voice for what Thrain started. But he's just another coward with men and guns and a hatred for truth. Elijah, she added softer, he has children, locked in the chapel. His jaw tightened. How many? 7. Maybe more. He trades them. Uses them. And you came here alone? She gave a bitter smile. I stopped being alone when you saved me. He nodded once. Then, let's finish what we started. They didn't wait for nightfall. Elijah moved like he used to, silent, sharp, certain. Clara trailed him, bow drawn, steps light as deer on snow. They circled behind the chapel, found the back wall unguarded. Inside, the air reeked of sweat and smoke. Muffled sobs drifted from beneath the floorboards. They entered through the cellar. He found the hatch near the altar, barred from above. He lifted it. 2 wide eyes blinked back at him. It's all right, he whispered. We're getting you out. He helped the children crawl up, one by one. Boys and girls, some no older than Clara had been when he found her. Their wrists were bruised, eyes hollow, but they moved fast. Clara herded them through the back, while Elijah covered the front. That's when the door creaked open. A man stepped in. Not Thrain, but close. Same long coat, same pale eyes, same silver cross. The Risen One. He raised a rifle. Elijah Cade, he said. Your kind never learns, Elijah growled. Then the shooting started. Bullets cracked through the chapel walls. Elijah dove behind the pulpit, firing back. Clara dragged a boy to cover as a window shattered above. Outside, 3 men advanced up the slope. Elijah gritted his teeth. We're outnumbered. Clara knelt beside him, stringing another arrow. Then let's give them fewer. He smiled grimly. You always were better than me. They moved together like breath and heartbeat. Elijah drew fire from the front. Clara flanked left, taking down a rifleman with a clean shot to the chest. She moved like she'd been born for it. Not angry, not vengeful, just certain. Elijah stormed the steps, shot one man through the door, then kicked it open, and came face to face with the Risen One. They collided hard. Elijah's gun flew wide. The man slammed him into the wall, fingers at his throat. Elijah gasped, grappled for the knife at his belt, but it was gone. You think the land needs balance? The preacher hissed. The land needs order, power, fear. Elijah spat blood. You're no preacher. No, he said. I'm the future. Then came the sound. A click. Clara's voice behind him. Let go of him. The Risen One froze. She stood in the doorway, rifle aimed steady. I won't miss. He sneered. You won't shoot. You don't know me. He lunged for her. She fired once. He collapsed at Elijah's feet, blood pooling into the warped floorboards. Silence followed. Just breathing. Dripping rain. A sudden stillness. The battle was over. The children were safe. The men scattered. The last of Thrain's poison washed away. Elijah sat on the chapel steps as dawn crept across the hills, casting gold over blood and broken wood. Clara sat beside him, arms streaked with dirt, eyes turned east. You did it, he said. No, she answered. We did. He looked at her, saw her fully now. Not a child, not even a girl. A woman forged in fire. Where will you go? She looked out across the prairie. Where they need me. There are others still hiding. Other girls like me. Elijah smiled. You're building something? I'm lighting the fire you started. They sat in silence a while, listening to the earth breathe again. Then she stood, walked into the light, and didn't look back. He watched her until she vanished. And he knew the truth. He thought he was helping one child. Turns out, he saved a bloodline. And now, that bloodline was saving the world.